Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Bryant's Alumni Association, welcome to the first of a series of webinars this spring designed to share alumni professional expertise with Bryant graduates and students. Before I turn the program over to our presenter, Elizabeth Beth Carter, and our facilitator, Marissa Crean, I need to provide you with some ground rules for today's webinar, which will last for 1 hour. All participants will be in a listen-only mode. However, we encourage you to comment and ask questions using the question and answer feature located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. After today's presentation, you'll receive a survey. Please take a moment to provide some feedback, as your comments are valuable as we expand our professional development programs for alumni. And also, I just want to share with you our schedule for upcoming webinars. The topics include Own Your Career, Effective Strategies for Success on Wednesday, March 16th, Networking 2.0 on Wednesday, April 20th, and Leading High-Performing Teams on Wednesday, May 18th. And all those webinars are up for registration, and to register, visit the career section at alumniconnect.bryant.edu. Now I'm going to turn the program over to Marissa Crean. She's a class of 81 and director of the Financial Development Program at the Hartford. Marissa is an active member of Bryant's National Alumni Council and also serves as a career coach for alumni. Take it away, Marissa.
Thanks, Tim. And I noticed that what you were saying was coming in and out, like there was a break in the sound. So I'm just going to quickly hit on some of the points. The presentation is being recorded today, so it's going to be available for you to refer back to it on the Alumni Connect website for Bryant. And then we to comment or ask questions using the Q&A or right corner. And we're going to send you a survey after the fact so that we can get your feedback on this presentation as well as future questions. I'm going to introduce Beth. She graduated from as a member of the 25 with a degree in business administration and a concentration in business communications. She also has an MBA from Baruch College. She owns Carter Consultants, which is an international executive search firm, which is an executive business and career coaching company. She's a certified professional coach and certified professional resume writer, and is an adjunct professor in Bryant's Executive Development Center. She also serves on the National Alumni Council with me, and she's conducted many presentations and workshops as part of her businesses, has blogged for the Huffington Post, and recently published a book. I'm happy to turn over to Beth and today's presentation on salary.
Hello everyone, I'm very excited to be doing this presentation today. It does sound a little bit like Marissa and Tim kind of faded a little in and out. So if you have any questions after this, I'll have my contact information available to you at the end of this. You're more than welcome to reach out and ask any questions. We have a lot to cover today. You know, when you look at salary negotiation, as cut and dry as a lot of us would like to think it is. So we're going to talk about your personal inventory and what that is. We're going to be talking about a budget. And how do you identify really what you're worth out in the marketplace? We're also going to talk about, you know, what kind of negotiator you are, different types, and hopefully you resonate with one or two of those. We're also going to talk about the components of an offer, because these days it's not just base and bonus and or stock options. There's a lot more, and it's a lot more complicated than it has been in years past. And then which is probably one of the most important, and how do you negotiate with confidence? We're also going to talk about the fact that sometimes your current company may counteroffer you, and what is the best way to handle that. Of course, along the way when you are negotiating. There are definitely mistakes to avoid, so hopefully we'll highlight a few of those so you do not get in that trap. So to start, we want to ask a poll. Tim, maybe you could launch the poll. When you think about, negotiations, maybe you're in the beginning of a search, or you've gotten a phone call from a recruiter or a hiring manager directly, or someone's reached out to you on LinkedIn, when should you really start thinking about negotiations? So it'd be helpful if you, respond to this poll so we can kind of gauge our audience here. The other thing to think about too is that it is a process. It's, as I said, it's not cut and dry, but there are twists and turns along the way, and we're going to be definitely, highlighting those, but I'm sure you may after that. So how are we doing on the poll, Marissa?
That's a good question for Tim. Tim, is it time now to
I'm taking
show
a
us
look
our
at it.
results?
It looks like we got about 70%, so let me close it out, and then we'll share that poll. And there we go.
Okay. So 54% of our audience talked about or think that it's when a recruiting or hiring manager initially contacts you. And then 20% thought when you receive the offer. And then 11% said none of the above. And I think, Tim, you're going to start sharing, when we close this poll, you're going to share your screen so everybody can see the presentation?
Yeah, it looks like we're having some some folks who can't see the presentation. So let me go ahead and do that. Hold
I'll
on
let you
one
know when I
second,
can see
folks.
it.
Hold on.
Well, I find it interesting that 11% said none of the above. Unfortunately, I'd love to ask another question and find out, what those people think. But I'm glad that only 7% thought that it's when you have met the hiring manager.
Yes, that's correct.
So are we seeing our screen now?
I think you have to stop sharing the poll results, Tim, and then or Beth, if you have your presentation open, you can share screen.
I have the screen up.
Okay, so yeah, so in the webinar tool, go to webinar tool in the upper right corner is screen sharing, and
If not, I think
the presenter.
I can drive.
Okay, good.
Beth, would you like me to drive?
Be sure.
There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Sorry for the
Okay, so
hiccup,
we're going
folks.
to
Go
go to
ahead,
the
bud.
next screen.
All right, go ahead, Beth.
Next screen, Tim.
Sure.
So the first thing before you start even thinking about a job search is the fact you need to think about your personal inventory. And what I mean by that is when you go to work, we're all different, meaning some people like to get dressed up, wear suits, or it's required to wear suits. Others, it's more business casual. Maybe it's dress down Fridays, whatever it may be. But there's a cost behind it. You need to understand, what is expected in that respect. Also, some people really like to go out to lunch every single day. Other people bring their lunch every day, or it's a combination, or people get coffees in the morning. All of this adds up over time. The other piece of that is transportation. Maybe you have the luxury of, a 2-minute commute and you drive or you walk. Some people, I'm a native New Yorker, so, I used to do transportation into Manhattan. There's a cost associated with that. So, we don't really tend to think about this until we're faced with it, but it's something, that you really do need to keep into consideration. So, Tim, on the next one, we actually have another poll. And because we're going to talk about personal budget next. And the thing is you can't negotiate until you know what you need to make. And a lot of people, you know, when I'm career coaching, it's the first question I ask. I say, do you have a personal budget? And it's amazing what the answers are, and I'll be interested to see how this goes. But the thing, you know, there's all kinds of ways to do it. You can do, you know, an Excel spreadsheet. You can, there's different programs out there. I kind of like to see the one that, you know, maybe is 12 months out, so you can compare and contrast over time. And we're going to talk about the different pieces of the personal budget. So people are answering the poll.
Sure.
Tim, how are the results coming out?
Results are coming in. Let me close that out, and I'll be happy to share.
Okay, so 54% said yes, that they have a personal budget, and 38% kind of, and no one said that they don't want to talk about it, so that's a good thing because we're going to talk about it.
This is great. I'm glad to hear that over half do have a personal budget. I'll be honest with you, some of my career coaching clients actually would answer number 4, that they don't want to talk about it. So that's good, and I'm hoping that that plus 8% will consider actually starting to sit down and really do put a budget together, because, you know, it would be a shame that you take an offer and then realize it just doesn't work, you know, longer term for yourself. So, Tim, next screen. You know, the parts of the budget, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but let's go over it a little bit, is, you know, your essentials, anything to survive. And of course, medical expenses are going up, insurance is going up, you know, again, transportation, it depends on how you get to and from where you work. You know, and then you have the seasonal type of things. Needless to say, in Rhode Island, we've had a much milder winter, which is I'm very thankful for. But I know that last year when I kept track of my oil bill, it was through the roof. So those are the types of things you need to, you know, take into consideration. If you have children, you know, summer and vacation camp, those expenses can add up. You know, loans, and upon the extras. Because the thing with the extras is, again, jobs, and you go from a job where you're wearing, you know, maybe business casual, you know, and now you have to wear suits or suits periodically, you know, there's a dry cleaning bill attached to that. Or maybe, and we're going to talk more about how the offer looks, but the idea too is there might be things that your new company will offer that you don't get in your current company. So these are all the types of things as you prepare your budget to really keep in consideration. Tim, next slide. So the big thing is, of course, is how much are you really worth? And a lot of people, you know, kind of try to compare themselves to other people, which is what you're going to need to do. But there's no clear-cut apples-to-apples type of thing. So what you need to do is, if you don't have a resume, first of all, or not a good one, you really should spend the time to write a resume. And needless to say, you're going to list your accomplishments. But you really need to sit down and take that list and expand upon it. You can't put every accomplishment on your resume or on your LinkedIn profile. But you really have to realize that you bring value to an organization. The reason why companies are hiring, if you think about it, is because they have a void in their talent. It might be because someone's retired, someone's left the company, they got fired, whatever it is, but this company has a void, and you are going to fill that void, and it comes at a price. To do this, you know, you can look at Indeed.com and figure out, you know, kind of who may be similar people to you. There's definitely function-specific job boards. But the thing is that I wouldn't necessarily, you know, if you're looking on Indeed, don't limit yourself to, say, Rhode Island if you're in Rhode Island. What I would do is I would look at similar types of locales and see what the compensation structure is. Needless to say, if you're relocating, that's a different topic. But, you know, you're not going to compare salary and talent experience with Rhode Island to, say, Manhattan or Los Angeles or someplace else. So, you know, keep that in mind. The other thing is research and benchmark your current company against industry standards. And there's, you know, different types of surveys and things out there. But even just comparing, you know, are you in a Fortune 500 company today, smaller company, or vice versa, you know, there are ways to kind of research, you know, how your company, you know, stacks up. Glassdoor is also a way to look at just, what people think about the companies that they work for. And in that case, the compensation does come up sometimes that a company's stingy or they're very generous or things along those lines. Lastly, if you're thinking about relocating, you really need to do your homework even more than the person that's just moving from one position to another and not relocating. So you need to look at cost of living differential. And with that, again, it's not just the move, but you have to go back to that budget and think about, does my child need to now be in private school? Is it going to be more costly to commute? Prices, just the basics. I mean, I moved from Fairfield, Connecticut 3 years ago to Rhode Island, and my cost of living has changed even though it's a 2-hour difference. So again, you really need to do your homework on this. The other thing that I want to point out is you also have to look at the marketplace and where your talent lies in the marketplace. As an example, most of the auto manufacturers are in Detroit. But there are some automakers and or auto parts companies that are located outside of Detroit. So let's say you take a job in Iowa. Let's just say that after a year or two, you're not happy with the company you're with, and you're going to need to make a move again. Well, if your talent is not prevalent in that marketplace in Iowa, you're going to have to relocate again. I mean, I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy here, but there are times when your talent, or your company it's just not a good match. So as you're looking at the marketplace for that particular locale, you should identify other companies that are similar or how you could make a switch down the road if this doesn't work out. I mean, I just spoke with a potential candidate the other day. They relocated from New York to Florida, and she's been there about 7 months, and she mentioned to me that her husband's not very happy living in Florida. And she says, I can't move right now because she has to stay for a certain period of time, otherwise she'll have to pay back the reload costs. But more importantly, her talent is not going to, she's going to have to physically move because there's just not a lot of companies, if any, besides the one she's currently working for, that really could use her experience. So keep all of this in mind. Marissa, are we getting any, anyone's willing to, or more than willing to ask questions, please do so. Is anyone asking questions, Marissa, at this point?
Not yet, not yet.
Okay, well, I encourage you to ask questions through this presentation because I'm sure you'll have some, so please don't hesitate to write in your questions. Tim, let's move on. So this is a great book, Bargaining for Advantage by Richard Schell. This book is about negotiating more like business deals. However, I found it very helpful in preparing this presentation amongst, and I've written articles about salary negotiations. Because the big thing is that in negotiations, a lot of people have never done it before. So they lack the experience of doing it. It makes a lot of people very nervous. And so he classifies negotiators in 5 different ways. The first one, of course, is that they just don't want to do it. They want to avoid it like the plague. And about 20% of job seekers actually do not even think to counteroffer. They get the offer from the hiring manager or HR, and they just accept it. The problem with that is that you really don't know if the company was anticipating that you counteroffer. In sales positions and possibly even positions in financial services, it's actually looked badly if the candidate does not counteroffer. Because if you are a really good salesperson, you should be able to negotiate your own salary, and it's a give and take. So we expect, especially certain industries and functional areas, to negotiate. But really, everyone has a right to negotiate compensation. The second one is called compromise. And that entails that each side comes to some agreement, and so the gains are equal between them. So as an example, a company, let's say, offers you $50,000 base salary and a 10% bonus. So you turn around and you counter with a $60,000 base and a 20% bonus. So the end result is that you end up in the middle, like $65,000 base plus a 15% bonus. So you kind of meet in the middle. And that can work very well, especially in a salary negotiations type of environment. The next one, the third type, is accommodates. And this is not practical in a job search, to be honest with you, because in the end, the job search person is going, the job seeker is going to lose out. This is really when you pretty much just kind of not necessarily give in so much, but you accommodate what the offer is. And the thing is that the other thing that you want to not do is bluff. And we're going to talk about mistakes later, but don't bluff, meaning like say something and then realize that that this isn't just this isn't going to work out. The other thing is keep in mind that you probably, if you've been contacted by a recruiter, you've already told them your compensation. So they're fully aware of that in most cases. The thing is that an HR person or a hiring manager may turn around and say, well, we can't give much more. And so they bluff on their side. And the reality is most companies can accommodate a higher increase. Where they run into a problem is if it's at the top of a grade level, then what do they do with this person 1 or 2 years down the road? But the idea is that they know your comp going in. They can walk away right from the beginning, but if they're still talking to you and get to a point of an offer, obviously that they have some extra money in their pocket that they can negotiate a higher salary for you. The next one is really the competitive strategy, and this is really more for someone who really wants to do a lot of maneuvering. But the problem with this one is you can be overly competitive. And with that, you come across potentially as abrasive and or unrealistic. So I don't necessarily recommend that one. And the last one really is the collaborative one. And this can be viewed as the most creative of the 5, but it also can be the most time-consuming. And with that, this one really consists of brainstorming ideas and resolving tough issues to come to an amicable offer. So as an example, suppose the base and bonus the hiring company is offering is fair, but you're going to lose, say, your spouse's salary with the relocation. So the company is willing to provide, outplacement services to your spouse, but that's not good enough for you. So you may counter that you want a sign-on bonus and also maybe a consulting assignment for your spouse for a set period of time until they secure a full-time role. So you and the company may continue to counter each other with some other innovative ideas. But as I said before, this takes some time. And usually the higher ups in an organization are going to have to get involved in this. So as I said, it's creative, definitely, but it is more time consuming. So we're going to launch another poll. I'm very interested to hear what you think of the type of negotiator that you are. By asking this question, we'd like to see how you see yourself. And the thing is that once we find out what the majority are saying, we can talk a little bit more about it. But a lot
Hey,
of
Beth.
Yes.
Hi, Beth. I thought while people are answering the poll, I might get one of our 2 questions in.
Oh, great.
One of them is relates to probably as part of the negotiation, especially if you're relocating from, let's say, Boston to Chicago. When and how much leverage do you have to get a company to reimburse relocation expenses?
Well, I tend to recruit at probably the higher middle management into executive level, and all my clients are willing to pay for relocation. So I don't usually run into that issue, but most companies, we try to recruit as locally as possible, and if we can avoid a relocation, we'll do that. Companies do try to get creative in the sense that if it's a more junior level position, they may give you, I had one client that was a major retailer, and they just offered a lump sum. I believe at the time it was like $10,000. So, a person could move their own stuff with a U-Haul and pocket the rest of the money, or they could get a professional mover in and pay a little extra on their own dime. But if the company is, recognizes the fact that you are elsewhere, then of course that they will most likely pay relocation costs. It's just the matter of how they do that.
Okay, so the person that asked that question, if you want to email me back and let me know that answered your question. And Tim, do we have the poll responses now?
We sure do. Let me share those.
Okay, so the greatest majority see themselves as compromisers, Beth. and then the next, that's like 41. And 26% are in the avoidance category, followed by 19% supportive.
So that's interesting that, and I'm thrilled to see again that 41% is in that mode. Because really, for a job search standpoint, that is probably the best situation to be in. Because with both sides coming to kind of middle ground, there's really no ill will. It's a win-win for both sides. But again, going back to the avoidance one, I think you need to kind of, again, it's all about self-awareness, is really understanding why do you avoid or want to avoid counter-offering. And I think a lot of reasons why people don't want to negotiate is that they're just not used to it. It's very uncomfortable. So I try to get people to do an exercise prior to any type of salary negotiations. And that could be maybe you want to buy an item at a store, and usually smaller stores will negotiate. So if you walk into, say, a small family-owned jewelry store, as an example, and you see a ring that you want to buy, and the price is $500, you may say, hey, I'll offer you $450. Practicing negotiations works very well. So if you try it in more of a safe environment, like buying a product or something like that, then when you get to the point of doing heavy-duty negotiations like for your salary, it gets that much easier. And we're going to talk about ways, other ways to work on your negotiations. And said they were competitive, so that's good. But I think that again, practice, just like anything else in life, especially you practice to interview, you work on your resume. Negotiation needs to be practiced as well. So having done that, is there another question?
Yeah, I got a few, but this one I want to kind of get in before we get too far down the road of actual negotiating. But it goes back to thinking about where you might want to work and in what industry, if you're changing industries. And so one of our listeners is asking about the sales industry, and does it make sense to be or if you are in sales, does it make sense to be exploring different industries, or is it a better advice to stay within one industry and build your network and skill set?
Well, not knowing the person's actual background, but let me say this. I always said to salespeople that I can teach you an industry. I can't teach you to be a salesperson. I kind of feel that sales is almost innate in certain people. So I'm actually working with a client right now that's in the auto parts industry, and he wants to move into medical sales. And so he's building his network partially through LinkedIn. He's reaching out to people through his alma mater as well as through some contacts he has. And he's actually getting interviews in the medical equipment industry. And I know of others that have made that switch. I think it's a little bit more difficult if it was a different type of functional area. But one of the things that you need to think about, again, and this is really not about negotiations, but more about just yourself, is that when you're making a switch, either functionally or in an industry, you need to figure out what your transferable skills are. And so that's looking more potentially at your soft skills. Maybe you're a great presenter, you are very analytical, you're very good at leading. So I think that, and people seem to think too that when you make that switch into a different industry, let's go back to this person in sales, that you may have to take a pay cut or a lateral. Yes, possibly you do, but now that the economy is picking up, if you're really good at sales and you can prove to the hiring company that you can bring your accomplishments and your success into their organization, there really is no reason that you cannot get a bump in your current company.
So good. And then another question that a couple of people have had is talking about when you're working with a recruiter, how honest should you be about where your current salary is, or should you, just be more focused on what you want to achieve or should you inflate the number a little bit?
So that's an interesting question, and I've had conversations with people that there are salary coaches actually out there. I am not one of them. And they will tell you flat out that you should not tell the recruiter what your compensation is. And I actually, after meeting with one of those a few months, reached out to some of my recruiter colleagues and asked them how they handle it. You know, no one has a lot of time to fool around with a job search. And so as a recruiter, if you're not willing to be upfront with me, you know, I'm not going to continue the conversation. And granted, I tend to work at a higher level. But the reality is one way or another, I'm going to find out what your compensation is. So you might as well tell me on the front end. But some of the questions that I ask, and we're going to talk a minute about the components of an offer, but if you tell me your base salary is, let's say, $100,000, my next question is when are you up for review? And then they'll tell me, and then I'll say, what is the average raise increase? And in today's world, it's about 2 to 3%. If you get much more than that, you know, thank your lucky stars. Companies in general are not giving huge raises. But the next question then, of course, is the bonus. So not only do I ask you what your bonus is today, but I'll go back 3 years. And part of that is when the economy was really bad, some companies just didn't pay out bonuses. So people were very hesitant to tell me that in 2011 they didn't get a bonus. So I'll say, okay, let's go back to 2010 and 2009. The other part to that bonus is how is it figured? Is it company performance, individual performance, division performance? So I'll ask how that is broken down. And then the last question I ask on that is, when is the payout? So the thing is that you need to, really be upfront. I mean, I do know people that sometimes will inflate it a little bit, but I think in the end, honesty is it's going to work in your favor, because if you tend to inflate your salary and then they turn around and ask you for your W-2, which some companies will ask for, or at least recruiters will, you may get caught with your pants down. So
Okay, great.
on that,
That's very
Tim,
helpful.
Tim, I think we can switch to the next slide. So again, these are all the different components of a potential offer. And the thing is that, as I said, I don't know the age range of the people on this call, but some people may just only get a base and bonus, and that's perfectly acceptable, especially if you're on the younger side of the spectrum there. But the thing is that, again, if you are going into a new company, you need to understand not only what the base and bonus is, but again, as I said before, you need to know what you're judged on to get that bonus. Base increases, it works differently in different companies, meaning it could be a calendar year, it could be a fiscal year, it could be your anniversary year, date. So really make sure that you understand, when you're going to be anticipating an increase. Let's say, for argument's sake, that maybe for some reason you took a lateral on your base salary. I don't know why you would, but people do it, and there's reasons for it. Maybe that you've been looking for a while, you can't relocate for a couple of years, you don't want to relocate, and maybe you're not working currently, so you take a lateral on what your last base salary was. You can negotiate when that next increases. Maybe you could say, I really wanted a bump on my base. I understand that you can't do that right now. Is it possible that I could be reviewed again in 6 months? So that's another way around it. On the bonus, same thing. There's no reason, depending on the circumstances, to ask for a sign-on bonus or be reviewed for a bonus 6 months out. Companies will sometimes, if it's less than a year before bonuses are paid out, they'll prorate it. So again, you really need to understand, how that's all structured. Stocks.
Hey, Beth?
Yes.
One of our listeners is actually asking about how much more bargaining power does an MBA give you? And I was just wondering if that almost fits in with, sometimes company perks or tuition reimbursement. But if you've already done that, maybe there's a bargaining chip there.
Well, needless to say, the more experience you bring to the table, with degrees and extra degrees like an MBA or a master's, certifications, certain series like the Series 7, Series 6, different licenses that people hold, and CPA. Needless to say, that is a bargaining chip. There's no doubt about it. It's interesting. Companies still see it as a buyer's market. And there's a lot of newly created positions right now, so I used to kind of tease that, the client might have 10 things on their wish list on the job description, and all of a sudden they meet someone that has an MBA. Now every candidate needs an MBA. Or someone speaks Spanish. Now everyone has to speak Spanish. So companies, keep trying to squeeze more and more out of one person in terms of all the requirements. So if I'm stacking two candidates up against each other, if someone has an advanced degree or a license or whatever, yes, that could be definitely used as a bargaining chip. So yes, that's a very good question to ask. So in talking about, the second bullet here, one of the questions on that one is what's the vest? Usually these are vested within 3 years, although I'm starting to see the number creep up a little bit. I've been seeing now that vesting is 4 or 5 years. So you really, again, make sure you ask that question. The different types of retirement accounts are pretty self-explanatory. Again, if you need help with that, you really should go to, an expert in that field. Health benefits, some health benefits include, some don't. Again, really make sure you understand that. And insurance. Now the next one on the car allowance and mileage, especially when you're talking to someone that does use their car a lot, like people in sales, you really need to make sure that if they're giving you, say, a car allowance, you may want to ask the question, when does that get reviewed again? Because companies, especially with all these mergers that are going on, and there's a lot of them going on right now, the new company may be changing that, or maybe every 6 months they review, how they do their sales compensation plan. So just make sure that you know when the next review is going to be up, at the senior rank, so that you can take that into consideration. More people are looking at flex time too. Again, there is a price to that. So again, you can ask for that as part of the offer. The other perks piece, some of this people say, oh, this is only for the executive levels. But this is not true. There are many companies now that, especially smaller ones, that are really trying to attract, high quality talent. And they recognize the fact that people want more than they're not just motivated by money. And so some of these things, like especially like on-site daycare and tuition reimbursement or a gym membership, go a long way with some of the people that are in the job market. So companies are getting more creative in those types of things within the offer. So people should really ask about these things. If you're not sure that it's a good question to ask, even through LinkedIn, you could reach out to somebody else who works in the company, or maybe somebody who knows somebody, and say, I hear they have tuition reimbursement, can you find out more for me? Or if you're asking the recruiter or the hiring manager about it, with tuition reimbursement, how long do I have to stay with the company before, I can, what's the payback on that? So just make sure that, that's a commitment that the company is putting money out on you, that you may have to stay a certain period of time. So just keep that in mind. Any other questions for the moment, Marissa, before I move on?
Yeah, I've got a few. So here's one that I actually just got. What are your thoughts about negotiating to work from home a certain number of days per week or per month? Should you wait until you've been there a while, or is it okay to ask right away?
I think it depends on the job again. Unfortunately, it's very hard for me to be carte blanche across the spectrum. But I do get asked, like even when I'm recruiting, candidates, people do ask me, is it possible that they can work, 1 day a week or 2 days a week, especially if it's a long commute. We will go back, I will go back to a hiring manager and ask if that's feasible. A lot of times the answer has been, at least for the first 6 months, they do have to be there every day. Keep in mind that part of a job is relationship building, and it's hard to do that when you're sitting at home. Other types of positions, of course, there's no issue in working out of your home. So I don't think it's a problem to ask up front. But again, you need to be flexible on your end. If they say it may be 6 months, a little bit down the road, does that work for you or does that not? Is that one of your deal breakers?
Good. And then my other question for you, I've actually got a couple that I'm going to combine because they both relate to, you're getting a new job, but it's in the same company. So how much leverage, negotiating power do you have for negotiating salary on a, transferring within a company? And the second part of that is if they're actually relocating you and your research says the cost of living is higher, 30 to 40%, how do you build that into, and can you build that into the salary negotiation process?
Yes and yes. So first of all, yes, you certainly can negotiate within your own company. And I encourage it because, as I said, the average raise these days is only 2%. So if you're moving into a more senior level position, or maybe you're just even taking a lateral but it's in a different division, there must be a reason why the company is asking you to do this or offering this. So again, you need to do your homework and find out what is comparable in other companies, or maybe the person who had the position before, you can find that out. But definitely, my feeling is you can always ask questions and try to get as much information as you can, because you really can't make an educated decision on how much this position is worth. With the cost of living, again, you need to do your homework. And if it is, there's times that, back years ago, I used to recruit people from Manhattan, actually Wall Street types, to Charlotte, North Carolina. Now that was a plus in the sense that the cost of living was a lot lower in Charlotte, but one of the things that did come out was, even though the cost of living was lower, if you had children, though, the Charlotte school system was not very good, and so many people had to put their children in private education. So, that was a big bill that was going to be, especially if a child was younger, you're looking, potentially 18 years of paying for private education before you even get to the college bill. So these are the types of things that you need to consider. And I would be armed once you sit down at the table with, your current boss or your future boss or the HR person, whoever you need to sit down with. I would have that information readily available so you can, literally pull it out and say, well, this is what I've learned, let's talk about it. So you definitely can negotiate on that as well.
Okay, and then a final question at this point is thinking, like, if somebody's thinking about starting their own business, and so they're going to be the owner and employer, do all of these things that we're talking about kind of work in reverse?
Oh, definitely. Just because and congratulations to whoever's thinking about starting their own company. I've had mine for almost 25 years, and of course you have to think on the flip side of that, people are going to want to negotiate with you, and you better be prepared on what your budget is in terms of what can you really offer someone, and you need to do your homework too, because companies that are underpaying will lose talent, and there is an expense on just process to get this person on board. Either you've run an ad, you've engaged a recruiter, your own personal time in interviewing people, that all comes at an expense. So if you offer a lower salary or what you think is fair, but then you find out later it's not, you're going to potentially lose that person, and you're going to have to start that process all over again, and there's an additional cost. So it definitely works on the flip side as well to pay attention to all of this. So I think let's move on, Tim. So in terms of responding to the offer, interestingly enough, there are differences between men and women. But before I get into that, I do want to say one thing is that when you are expecting an offer, let the company make the offer first if you can do that. Sometimes recruiters will ask, what are you thinking as a bump up? What are you looking for in your next compensation? If you can avoid that question, I would try to do it. Because you might put yourself, like, let's say you're making 80 right now on a base, and they say, well, what would you be interested in? And you say 90, but they were going to come back to you with 100. Now all of a sudden, you kind of put the bar at a certain level. So if at all possible, let the hiring company make the offer first. And in regards to gender differences, it is known that men tend to be more assertive. I'm not suggesting that women become more assertive, but again, be more aware of the fact that women are more accommodating, and they really kind of want everybody to be happy, and that's not the best negotiating tool. I know men that can be too assertive too, so just be careful with that. In terms of cultural differences, especially if you're not necessarily going to a different part of the United States, you're entertaining maybe an overseas assignment or things like that, there are cultural differences. But there are even differences, from going from, say, Rhode Island to Manhattan. in terms of that there's some kind of unwritten rules. So just be cognizant of how, when you do respond to the offer, that you take everything into consideration. If you're getting a verbal offer face-to-face, not over the phone, watch for the body language of the person that's making that offer, which probably is the hiring manager. Are they comfortable making that offer to you? Do they seem to be like, if they've got their arms crossed and looking kind of angry about it, there must be something going on behind it. So don't feel intimidated by body language, but be careful of your own body language too, as well as of the person making the offer. I can't stress the second part of this bullet more enough, meaning you should really have good listening skills. It's amazing to me that when I'm doing career coaching, that when I ask the person who got the offer, all the components of it, sometimes they miss a piece, or they don't ask some of the questions that I had mentioned earlier. So if you're in an actual meeting, definitely write it down. I would actually prefer an offer letter, which most companies will do, but if for some reason you don't get one, make sure you write down everything they say and then repeat it back to them. There is no reason, even if it's a face-to-face meeting, that you need to respond to this. You can take time to think it over, so don't react, right then and there, and be careful again about the body language piece. So what you can say to them, and this is perfectly acceptable, I'd like to think this over and get back to you. But having said that, you do not want to wait more than 48 hours. I would prefer actually waiting less than 24 hours, because you're holding everybody up, and especially if you think that they might counter that, it takes time. So definitely I would respond within 24 hours. Now, if you've done your homework, you really probably already have a good answer in your head. But as I said, take a little bit more time to think about it. There might be other things that we haven't discussed that make this an appealing offer. Maybe, a lot of people make moves these days, not because of money, but because of their supervisors. So if you really are very drawn to this person that will be your new boss, that may have some weight in your decision. Definitely practice your response. Call a good friend, call your mentor, call a coach, whoever it may be, and practice your response. Definitely have a plan B, maybe even a C or a D. Now what I mean by that is that, again, depending on the type of negotiator you are and the offer you receive, you may not get everything you want. So just, maybe you're willing to make a little less money, but you can work at home one day a week and you hadn't asked that before, or maybe, just be very creative because it will work in your favor. The other thing is be patient. In general, the job search takes time. I'm working on one project now. We keep telling the candidates that we're going to get back to them, we're going to get back to them, and we're going to get back to them. And it's just getting delayed and delayed and delayed. Historically, this company has always worked that way, but we were hoping they'd move a little faster this time. They're not. What that means, though, is that there's more people involved in the decision of selecting which candidate they want. And I know when we get to offer stage, again, it's going to be a time-consuming, or it's going to get delayed. So just be patient. As I said before, if you're unemployed and on this call, don't feel that you cannot negotiate. You definitely can negotiate, because again, keep in mind that there is a gap in the talent pool at this company, and they want you. So remember, you are still a wanted entity, and even though you are unemployed does not mean that you don't bring value. So please, I don't care, unless there's some really interesting circumstances, definitely negotiate, because the problem is if you take a lower offer, it's going to set the bar as you keep moving on in your career. So if you take say a $20,000 pay cut, that's just going to not help you moving forward. The other thing is that companies don't like to see someone take too low of an offer, because if let's say 6 months later you get a call from a recruiter and someone offers you a higher compensation, you're more likely to jump. Another interesting little tidbit that I learned in putting this together is, according to payscale.com, we didn't really talk about generational differences, but millennials in general are less likely to ask for a raise and are far more uncomfortable negotiating. And because they feel like if they negotiate or respond differently to an offer, that they might be perceived as pushy. And the thinking behind this is that it's from a lack of experience in negotiating. I think it's funny that they say it's just the millennials, because I've certainly worked with people that are Gen X's and even some traditionalists. A lot of people are not comfortable with negotiations, so please don't feel like you're the only one that's a little uncomfortable with this. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left. Yes, we have another question.
I know you got yeah, we do, and I know you're going to be kind of getting into like counteroffers and stuff like that, so I thought I would throw out some of the questions that were asked that kind of relate to that. But before we even get into that, one question that's come up a couple times is, how do you deal with the specific question, either in a job application or from the hiring manager, when they point out, ask you, what is your salary requirement? So it's like they haven't made an offer yet, but they're asking you, what is your salary requirement? How do you address that? And then come back to me for the the counteroffer questions.
Okay, so I think, it's tough, especially on an application. I try to, if you can avoid answering that question, I would avoid answering it. I know someone recently that was making a very different shift and really had no idea what the market was bearing, so didn't want to, kind of put themselves in a box. So they left that on the application. Luckily, they were able to leave it blank. And then when the recruiter and this person spoke, the job seeker asked what the compensation range they were thinking of. And so if you could throw it back to the hiring company, that would be better. Unfortunately, it is kind of a give and take, because no one wants to say too much. But if you could say, I'm really very excited about this role, I've done some homework here, but I'm really not sure, exactly, because I'm switching industries, or, it's a higher level or whatever. Even though I've done some research, I would be very curious to understand, what this company was thinking to pay. So if you can flip it around, I would really try. If you can't flip it around, meaning that they are really pushing you to the wall, I would give a range. So let's say you're making 70 now, and you might say, well, I'm interested in a compensation of 80 to 90 on the base, plus bonus, and then certain other perks. Definitely would want to at least know what the components potentially of the offer are, meaning what, besides health benefits, what else they offer, and kind of go from there. But try to avoid in any way, shape, or form that question if you can.
Great. And so now the counteroffers are when you're kind of in the negotiation process. If you make a counteroffer, can the company who made the original offer walk away from, withdraw their original offer from you? So does the counteroffer put your original offer in jeopardy? That's one question. And then the second question is, what happens if you accept one job offer and then you get a much better offer from someone else? Then what do you do?
Okay, so all right, so the first question again, just go over that again one more time.
Yeah, the first one was, can the hiring manager or company withdraw an offer after if you make a counter offer?
They can, but it's rare that that happens, and the reason being, again, is they know what your current compensation is, or your current compensation at this point. They know the parameters of what they can, pay, and what else they can offer, meaning the other perks. So, and again, this is an expensive process for everyone, both time and money. So, they usually, if someone, unless someone counteroffers with a ridiculous, offer, yes, they could pull it. But most likely, they're going to turn around and try to come to the middle, because so that it doesn't really behoove them to just, say, okay, this is our final offer, and this is all I'm going to take. So, or all we're going to pay. But if, more likely is that if the candidate makes a counteroffer and the company says no, then either the candidate can walk away or they can accept the original offer. And then the other question was about, say that again, I'm sorry.
Right, if you've accepted one offer and then you get a better one from someone else.
Yeah, there's a certain level of ethics on that. If you are looking at 2 or 3 positions and you get an offer with one company, I would definitely go to the other 2 companies if you're pretty close through the process and say, look, I've gotten an offer from X. You have to tell them what the company is, but say I've gotten an offer I'm very interested in your company. Can you speed the process along, or can you let me know what's going on? And then I would go back to the company that made the offer and say, look, I'm waiting to hear about another offer. I'd like a little bit of time. So as long as you're honest with it, but if you've actually accepted the offer, I really think the next offer might be really good. I mean, I just think that you have to be careful because your reputation's at stake too. You never know if the original company that made the offer, and then you accept it and then turn it down after, that person may move to another company and they could badmouth you in the industry. So you have to be careful with that. And I think ethically, an offer, you should accept it unless something, extenuating circumstances, which has happened, but I just don't think it's a good idea.
Right. I guess one of our listeners actually commented companies don't have any ethics at all. Well, that would be one that you don't want to work. That would be one you don't want to work for.
Granted.
Yeah.
Granted.
I do have and I know we're running out of time, and so I just want to be sure that somebody who sent it, they actually emailed in a question several minutes ago, and I think it addresses some other questions here. It's really hard to negotiate for salary, just annual salary adjustments. Sometimes you've been in a job for a while, so you're very experienced, but you've maxed out at the range. Do you have any tips for helping individuals build that case to get a higher base salary or maybe even a higher bonus?
Again, it goes back to research. You really have to walk in with numbers and say, this is what other people are paying. I'm not suggesting you hint that you're going to start a job search, but the point is you've done your homework and say, I really feel with my skill set. If they still can't do that, then maybe you can negotiate in a different way. Maybe you can get more vacation time or flex time, or they'll pay for a course. So again, you can get very creative, but that may or may not work for you, but that's another option as well.
Okay, and then how does somebody who is working part-time or maybe out of the workforce today, is there anything special that they need to do in order to help get ready and how do they do that research to find out the proper salary coming back into the workforce?
We're going to get to a slide in that in just 2 seconds. So because we're running out of time, can you flip to the next screen just quickly? So the only thing I'm going to say about, so these are just some quick mistakes that people make. When you get the offer, people tend to talk too much. Just be quiet. Don't say anything. The next thing is, never say that's my final offer. Flexibility is key here. Take advantage of it on both sides. Hopefully the company will be flexible and you need to be flexible. Negotiations definitely take twists and turns. Don't bluff, because you'll lose credibility. This is a process. This is you can't take it personally. You really need to take the emotion out of the equation. I actually did have once because a candidate got very arrogant and was asking for way too much money and, really kind of poo-pooed what the company was offering. So just do not be arrogant, because they decided that it really showed this candidate's true colors, and they decided that they didn't want this person working for their company. I think we've covered the next bullet, and then again, research, research, research. Moving on to the next slide. Again, you don't go in. You don't need to. With counteroffers, the last thing I'm going to say is that you shouldn't be using it. Going to your current hiring manager and kind of implying you're going to start a search. You really do need to kind of make sure that, yes, you've done your homework, but that you really want to stay with the company you're in. So that kind of addresses the question we had before. Any other one last question, Marissa? I think we've got time.
Yeah, one question that just came in has to do with, if your company changes your location after, let's say, a merger kind of thing, and so now your cost of commuting is 3 times what it used to be. Is that something that you can address with your employer, and if so, how would you do that?
Yes, you definitely can address it with your employer. Again, no exact figures. You know, I spend $100 more per month or whatever the number is, and then see if you can either get some kind of bump in a bonus or a pay increase. But yes, you definitely, or maybe that's a good time to turn around and say, hey, could I use flex time and work one day out of my home or something like that. So you need to kind of work that out. So here's some resources. Again, keep in mind that this webinar will be archived very soon. So here are some of the types of resources. Tim, flip to the next slide, please. So this is some information about me. You're more than welcome. I know we covered a lot in a short period of time, and we had some little audio issues at the beginning. So there's both my email. You're more than welcome to contact me if you have questions. And Tim, flip to the next slide. I just want to say I just recently published a book. It's called Job Search Equals Love Search, Career Strategies that Help You Find Love Too. If you think about recruiting and dating, they're very much alike. And I wrote it actually with a dating coach. The reason why I bring this up, and this is available in soft copy as well as Kindle on Amazon, is there is a whole chapter on negotiations. So that might be something else that you might want to consider. But again, you're more than welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions. So I think that's our today, and I appreciate your time today.
Thanks a lot, Beth and Marissa. So on behalf of the Bryant Alumni Association, I'd like to thank Beth and Marissa for an absolute great presentation. A lot of stuff covered, a lot of questions, which was great. But most of all, I'd like to thank all of the alumni and folks out there joining us this afternoon. Please look for that survey in your email, and this will conclude today's webinar. Again, it will be archived, so the presentation will be made available online and as well as this recording, and we'll send out those links. So thank you and have a great afternoon.